developing the report card, for the past 3 years, the Chamber has commissioned a public opinion poll on education. Now, over the course of the next several slides, we'll learn how Nashvillians feel about metro schools at the end of the last school year. This is not how the Chamber's Board of Governors feels. This is a study that's statistically relevant that shows how Nashvillians feel. First, for nearly 2/3 of Nashvillians felt our city was headed in the right direction. That's a tribute, a very clear and relevant tribute to Mayor Dean and our city's leadership. For the 3rd year in a row, education is the most important issue for Nashvillians, even at a time when the economy is a rising concern. 85% of Nashvillians believe improving public education is personally important to them. Now, that is not a margin of error kind of result. 85%. The public has rated the performance of elementary schools the highest, then middle schools, then the overall district, and then high schools. These ratings on a scale of 1 to 5 have remained consistent over the past 3 years, with the notable exception of the high school rating showing a clear pattern of improvement with each succeeding year. We're not necessarily into relative performance, but to take a three-dimensional view of what the district is accomplishing, I think it's significant to recognize the traction that our high schools are making. Asked whether K through 12 education in Nashville was better than 1 year ago, 52% it was about the same, 20% said it was better, and 16% said it was worse. Funding. You knew we'd get around to that, right? Funding was listed as the #1 challenge facing metro schools, and 79% of Nashvillians feel metro schools should be provided more funding, underscore more funding, in order to meet the challenges schools face. Now, how do you measure that? Okay, if you go to lunch tonight or you go to dinner tonight in a restaurant, just take a moment, look around the room, find a collection of 10 people. 8 of those people think that metro schools should be provided more funding in order to meet the challenges they face. Next, differentiated compensation for teachers, or pay for performance, said a different way, is a hot policy issue. So we asked a couple of questions on that topic. 61% of Nashvillians thought teachers should receive a substantial financial bonus if their students score well on standardized tests. That number shoots up to 80% agree when asked if teachers should receive a substantial financial bonus if they agree to take on additional leadership duties at their school. And we also asked a question about one of last year's report card recommendations, just checking up on ourselves even. Should metro schools have parents sign an agreement that outlines expectations for how a parent or caregiver should be involved in their child's education? 87% agree with that approach, nearly 9 out of 10. In the appendix of this year's report, Metro Schools reports on the status of this and all of last year's report card recommendations, and we encourage you to review that. Each year, the Chamber report card provides an assessment of the school system performance during the most recently completed school year. First and foremost, it's important to understand that the 2009-2010 school year now sets a new baseline for improvement, brand new bar. This was to be a pivotal year for metro schools under No Child Left Behind. After years of failing to reach the benchmarks, metro schools was categorized as restructuring 1 by the Tennessee Department of Education, just one step away from potential state takeover. In 2009, our district did make adequate yearly progress, or AYP, and was then categorized in restructuring 1, improving, but the work wasn't finished. You have to make AYP 2 years in a row to get off the state's high priority list. So what was at stake is metro schools can make AYP in 2010, the system would move into good standing. But if Metro Nashville Public Schools failed to make AYP, it would move into restructuring 2 and possible placement into the state's achievement school district. complicating this scenario, as if it wasn't complicated enough, was the implementation of in 2009-2010 of more rigorous K-12 standards in reading, math, and science. Metro students now had to reach proficiency targets based on more difficult standards and new assessments. In moving to these new, tougher standards in 1 year, the state determined that AYP decisions would be based on a single year of testing, the 2009-2010 year. The single year was used because the state believed previous year's data on the old standards just wasn't comparable. This approach, however, made it virtually impossible for districts to make AYP through the safe harbor provision, which allows districts and schools to make AYP if they demonstrate substantial improvement over previous years. But we didn't have a previous year. In fact, Metro schools made AYP in 2009 through the safe harbor provision. Well, as a result, as we'll see in just a moment, school districts across the state, not just ours, across the state, saw their proficiency rates drop under the new standards, and the district did not make AYP in 2010. As we all know, however, the new state standards weren't the only challenge facing our students as they prepared to take these high-stakes tests in May of 2010.